निशान साथ है इतने के कुछ शुमार नहीं हमारे दीन का क़िस्सों पे मदार नहीं।
Hi, this is my second day on the ward now since I've become neutropenic. Continuing with my marathon. Got a few side effects. My vision's a bit blurry at the moment, and
you know, he had been diagnosed with leukemia, and they had said to him at that time, because they do some sort of specialist tests and so forth, that it's 50-50. And he was very resolute, you know, calm, collective, strong. But again, I think all of this came back because of his connection to God.
You know, he'd spoken to me about death and the fact that he was completely content with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever that will would be. And I saw that. Never once did I see any sense of fear in him or any sense of detachment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
And I used to feel sometimes that maybe this is a front that he's putting on. Maybe the reality has not sunk in. Yeah, he was a very intelligent person. He was an optician by profession. And we spoke once privately, and despite being so close, some distance sort of came. And the distance was a nervousness about openly talking about it. And he stopped me and he said, Aziz Sahab, relax. And I'm thinking, he's telling me to relax. Yeah, I know what's going on. I know what the crack is. What can we do? We're here on God's earth. We're going to do our level best. At the end of the day, it's in his hands, but work does not stop. So I know what's going on. You know what's going on. Let's carry on working.
I remember when he was undergoing his treatment, it was Ramzan, and he wasn't able to keep any of his fasts. So he was just thinking, how do I give back to my faith? You know, I'm going through chemotherapy, and what can I do? So he dedicated his time in the small room that he was in hospital, and he decided to raise some money for Bloodwise.
I've just finished my chemotherapy for the second phase now. My legs are taking the toll now from the side effects from this chemo, but I just keep thinking about the end goal and what this money would do in terms of for the charity, for the research they can carry out so that we can beat this blood cancer.
कमाल मेरा एक बहुत प्यारा बच्चा था और बहुत ही मासूम था। बचपन से ही ना उसको सबके साथ बहुत प्यार करने वाला, ख्याल रखने वाला और हर एक की रिस्पेक्ट बड़े छोटे की वो करता था, खासकर बच्चों के साथ बड़ा प्यार करता था।
And I remember as a child, I was just watching television and there was an advertisement for a art kit. And I remember saying to him, I like this. And I just said it as a general comment. And without any hesitation, he bought it for me.
He was always very passionate, a very passionate humanitarian. You'd always see him raising some funds for Khudam Limdia, for other charities. And he was, we have a phrase, he was the light of the party, as it were. There was a bubbliness about him.
And he had a sort of infectious personality that, you know, people just wanted to speak to him and interact with him. So he did a huge amount of work with Red Cross. You know, with Max Newton, he got to know this gentleman and really got involved when the floods were happening in Somerset, and there was an impact here in Yorkshire region, and I used to take all of these externals with him to Jamaat events.
He was super keen to support whatever cause it was, whether it was sort of the emergency appeals for the Red Cross or taking presents into, you know, to the kids in the hospitals at Christmas. Really driven for that, really passionate about fundraising. I mean, he did a lot of fundraising, a lot of other charitable work, and quite rightly got awards, got national Queen's Awards for it and things like that, which is wonderful. The enthusiasm and the passion of people like Kamal that just wanted to do it just to help people for the love of helping people for the sake of humanity and inspired by their religion.
And then when we had the Diamond Jubilee, at that time it was decided by the Jamaat that there'll be one marathon walk or charity challenge as we call it now, Qudam Ansar Lajna, and it was at the Tower of London in 2012. Kamal raised the highest amount in terms of fundraising, 15,000, and from there he built upon it. A couple of years later he's voted the Guardian National Award Volunteer of the Year.
And then, he had the opportunity and he was blessed to meet the Queen as well. And he went out there and he went with my uncle at that time. And, again, wherever he had that opportunity, he would always plug the Jamaat. He never ever shied away from that in terms of who he was, what he represented and what the message of the Khalifatul Masih was as well.
बड़े फ़ाल दाई लल्ला थे, तबलीग का कोई मौका हाथ से जाने ना देते थे। अस्पताल में अपने इलाज के दौरान भी डॉक्टरों और देखभाल करने वालों का जमात से तारुफ करवाया, बल्कि मुझे खुद उन्होंने बताया था कि मैंने अपने वहाँ टीवी लगा लिया, MTA को लगाया हुआ है और प्रोग्राम दिखाता हूँ, उन प्रोग्रामों के हवाले से फिर तबलीग के रास्ते भी खुलते हैं। मजलिस अंसार सुल्तानुल कलम के मुतहर्रिक मेंबर थे। टीवी, रेडियो और अखबारों को 100 से ज़्यादा इंटरव्यूज़ के ज़रिए लाखों लोगों तक इस्लाम का पैगाम पहुँचाया।
Meeting others, it's this kind of sense of good brotherhood and just meeting lots of other people and learning at the same time.
Islam tells us that we must love everyone, and irrespective of the background and their differences, to love God is automatically requires to love His creation.
फिर उसे अफ्रीका जाने का बड़ा पैशन था कि मुझे कहता था कि मैंने ना अफ्रीका जाना है। इवन उसके जो जॉब पे भी उसकी कोलीग्स थी वो कहती थी कि उसको बहुत शौक़ था, मतलब इस चीज़ का था कि अफ्रीका में उसने जाना है। और हम बहुत कहते थे कि इसको कितना शौक़ है चैरिटी वर्क का ना। अफ्रीका में तो खैर उसने इंजेक्शन वगैरह लगाए, एक इंजेक्शन का इंतज़ार कर रहा था कि वो अभी मुझे मिला नहीं है, तो मैं ना जाऊंगा वहाँ पे। उसने इक्विपमेंट्स भी अपने काम से ला के रखे हुए थे कि मैं ये साथ लेके जाऊंगा वहाँ पे ना, तो लेकिन बहरहाल उसको मौका ही नहीं मिला।
On the Friday morning, I mentioned it to Huzur at Fajr time that Kamal's been diagnosed with that, and so Huzur knew from then. And then after his first chemo that he went through the first round, he wanted to do a mulaqat. He was very much wanted to see Huzur, and Huzur had been asking beforehand, and there'd been various communication. Then he arrived here with Dr. Zisab, I believe, and despite being in difficulty, he still had a medical term for it still in his heart, which they use for infusing drugs.
It was very difficult. In fact, if I can remember correctly, it was probably touch and go. It was against medical advice at some point. And he turned around and said, I need to go see Huzur Aqdas. And I said to him, that's not going to happen. And God forgive me for thinking that, but I was thinking in practical terms. You're too ill. He said, I'm going to see Huzur. You're going to take me. And so the mulaqat was arranged. I had the unique honor of driving him down. He was sat in the passenger seat. His legs and feet were very swollen. He was in a considerable amount of pain. He could just about manage to sit in that passenger seat. And despite him being in a lot of pain, I've never seen him so happy. Never seen him so happy.
He walked in and I went with him to meet Huzur, and then Huzur inquired about his health, his medication, etc. And lovingly, he had a photo with Huzur as well, passed his hands over him.
And I sat waiting, and as he came back, it was as if it was a new person. He's always a bubbly person, but the smile and he couldn't move, he couldn't jump, but if he was his old self, he'd be jumping up and down with joy. You could see the boys about to pop with excitement.
और कभी उसने मतलब इस तरह पता ही नहीं था कि उसने उसकी बीमारी एकदम इतनी हद तक बढ़ जानी है या वो उसने चले जाना। बस फिर उसके बाद सेकंड जो उसकी केमोथेरेपी हुई उसके लिए वो गया। तो मैंने मतलब जाने लगा तो ऐसे पता नहीं मुझे क्यों फीलिंग हुई थी, मैं सोच रही थी कि तुम ना मतलब अभी जाओ ना। तो खैर उसको निकलने लगा तो कहता मैं ना जा रहा हूँ। तो मैंने कहा अच्छा। फिर वापस वहाँ तक गया गाड़ी तक, तो मैंने कहा तुम वापस आओ, है ना। तो फिर मैंने उसे प्यार किया, बहन भी छोटी थी, उसने भी, तो वो रोने लग पड़ी। तो बस वो उसका आखिरी था कि मतलब वो अपने घर जो आया है।
So Friday morning after Fajr, again I mentioned to Azul that his condition is fragile, it doesn't look good, and that I'm going to be leaving now with the family to the hospital and just request for prayers. And I asked Azul if there's any message. He said just give my salam to Kamal Aftab. So when I got to the hospital, it's one of the things we did.
And went across to the hospital. By that time, Kamal Aftab had lost consciousness and he was in ICU. His saturation levels were dropping rapidly. I sat next to him and I thought to myself, you know what, the only thing to do right now is to read the Quran and durood to him. I was holding his hand and looking at his saturation levels, and they were just slowly, his oxygen, they were dropping and dropping and dropping, and I started to recite Surah Al-Fatiha. And as I recited Surah Al-Fatiha, I was amazed that his saturation levels, they began to increase. And when I stopped, they dropped again. And so I said, okay, I need to continue. So I continued, and they increased, and it wasn't a slight increase, it was quite significant. And I started to recite the durood, and they increased again. And I was amazed that, when he was in this kind of condition, that the love of Allah was so strong in his heart.
So I actually went to visit him in hospital when he was on treatment in Leeds. His attitude in the face of such a severe illness was quite amazing, actually. He was very calm, accepting, and actually quite happy. Not in a disjointed way, but in a very calm, collected, measured, happy way. And I remember saying, if I, had something like that, I'd like to behave in the way that he did then, and take it with such good grace.
On the Monday night, this is before he ended up in critical condition and he was moved into intensive care, I was sat with him with the system and surah. When you have, in hindsight, speaking about life in general, and he was just kind of giving advice, and he was just saying to me that if I could go back and kind of change anything about my life, or if I could go back and change anything about things that probably I gave too much importance to, it was, do not worry about things. Don't let things consume you in terms of worry. Just pray to Allah, and whatever will happen will be. And he said that's the best advice I can give to anyone. He spent this life worrying about things that are not to be worried about, because you're going to go to a higher power, and all these things that you think are important in this life, they have no consequence of importance beyond kind of having faith and prayer.
और फिर मैं उसको देखती, मैंने कहा तुम क्या कहना चाहते हो। फिर उसने मेरी तरफ ना लास्ट टाइम बस देखा, उसकी आंखों से आंसू गिरे हैं, तो बस कहता है कि मॉम आई वांट टू गो होम। तो मैंने कहा कि ठीक है, मैं तुम्हें ना ज़रूर लेके जाऊंगी घर। बस उसके बाद फिर उन्होंने उसकी जो लाइफ थी वो बस एंड हो गई, और उसका पता भी नहीं। मैं पास खड़ी, हाथ मैंने पकड़ा हुआ है, तो मेरा बड़ा बेटा कहने लगा कि नहीं, बस ये ना ख़त्म, वो सब कुछ ब्लड प्रेशर चीज़ें इसकी वो हो गई हैं, और हार्ट बीट वगैरह सब कुछ। मैंने कहा नहीं, वो भी ठीक है, कैसे तुम कह सकते हो, अभी तो उसने बात की है। और ये यूसुफ सारे पास ही थे, उससे कहने लगे कि तुम देखो, हुजूर ने तुम्हारे लिए इतनी दुआएं की हैं, तुम सब ने तुम्हारे लिए दिया, तुम वो चूज़ करो जो अल्लाह ताला तुम्हें कह रहा है, तुम वो रास्ता कमाल अपने लिए करो, तुम क्या चाहते हो, तो जो तुम चूज़ करना चाहते हो करो, कि जो खुदा तुम्हें कह रहा है। तुम खुदा पर तवक्ल करते हो खुद तो उस पर ही तवक्ल करो और तुम उस रास्ते को इख्तियार करो कि अल्लाह ताला तुम्हें उसमें तुम्हारी इस बीमारी को अल्लाह ताला राहत में बदले.
I remember once, just before Kamal had gone into onto the ventilator, he said, request Hazur for prayers, that ask Hazur to say, Allah takes it easy on me. And I remember speaking to Mr. Waqar Sahab and said, look, if you could pass the message, which he did. And then Kamal passed away straight after Jummah, basically, on the Friday.
उस वक्त भी कुछ नहीं कहा और बस वो सुनता रहा लेकिन बोल नहीं सकता था उससे बिल्कुल बोला नहीं जा रहा था और बस ऐसे बस देख रहा था तो बस यही जो उसने आखिरी मुझे लफ्ज़ कहे तो उसके बाद अल्लाह ताला ने उसे अपने पास बुला लिया बस वो यही चाहता था शायद वो उसका घर उसको बुला रहा था वो ये बताना चाहता था मॉम आई वांट टू गो होम तो अल्लाह ताला उसको अपने पास बुला रहा था और वो उस घर में जाना चाह रहा था.
एक जनाजा है मुकर्रम कमाल आफ्ताब साहब इब्न मुकर्रम रफ़ीक आफ्ताब साहब हडर्सफील्ड यूके का जो 7 अगस्त 2015 को लीड्स अस्पताल में ल्यूकेमिया की मर्ज़ की वजह से 33 साल की उम्र में वफ़ात पा गए. इन्ना लिल्लाहि व इन्ना इलैहि राजिऊन. बीमारी के आखिरी अयाम में अस्पताल में अपने कमरे से ही ल्यूकेमिया रिसर्च के लिए 50,000 पाउंड इकट्ठे करने की मुहिम चला रहे थे. ज़िंदगी के आखिरी सांस तक बेनफ्स होकर मुख्तलिफ़ प्रोजेक्ट्स में इंसानियत की खिदमत और तबलीग में मसरूफ़ रहे. बेशुमार खूबियों के मालिक थे. अल्लाह ताला इनके दर्जात बुलंद फरमाए और इनके बूढ़े वालदैन को भी सब्र और हौसला अता फरमाए. इनकी तस्कीन और तसल्ली के समान पैदा फरमाए. इनके बाकी भाई वगैरह जो हैं अज़ीज़ हैं करीबी हैं इन सबको अल्लाह ताला सब्र और हौसला दे.
खुदा ऐ कार साजो ऐब पोशो किरदिगार